Good morning, everybody. Hope everyone had a good weekend. And we should be able to come close to finishing the Reboot character this week. We'll definitely finish building him, but when we're done with him, building him, Modeler, we're going to send him over to layout, refine the surfaces, and I'll show you how to put a face on him. And then in addition to that, we won't get to that today, but probably Wednesday. And then I'm going to show you how to create a composite so that if you have a background image and you want him to look like he's in the background, you know, that he's a part of that image, then that's what I'll show you how to do. And then we'll be done with him. And we'll be able to move on to the next assignment, and you'll be on your own for that. I'll have you work on a very simple toy, but what we're going to do is we're going to emphasize the surfacing of it. So you can pick something much simpler than Mike here to build, and but we're going to focus on the surfacing so that, you know, when the surfaces look like wood or marble or glass or whatever that they look, you know, add the textures, add to the believability of the model. So where we want to continue today is to build his mouth, which is this little speaker. And if we can get beyond that, that would be great. But if we can accomplish that today, we'll be in good shape. So let's see, I'm going to switch from the left view to the right view, like so. And I have perspective top and back view from here. Okay, so what I want to do let me do it from the back view. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select a ball. Because really, if you look at his mouth or this disc, it's similar to a ball. And I'm going to go ahead and from the back view, I'm going to click and drag. And this is sort of important in that, there we go. I want you to note the orientation. Okay. That the orientation, notice that it pinches in the front and the back. And then when I've created a sphere in the other parts, for example, I've changed the orientation to left to right or top to bottom. In the other cases, the other instances that I've used the sphere, the orientation has not been important. It is important for this though, and you'll see why in a minute. So I'm trying to get this located here, and you'll see that the proportions are really kind of off. And I'll probably make it a little bit larger, and I'm going to make sure that I have the numeric requester visible. And let's go ahead and crank this up a little bit. So I want to make sure that the radius for the X, Y, and Z coordinates are all the same. So I'm going to crank this up to maybe 100 millimeters. And 100. And the size that will be on yours, I don't know. But that's something that you do have to pay attention to, approximate size, because on a couple of instances, I noticed in the table and lamp that some of you were having issues. And the issue was that maybe that's a little bit too big. It is. I'm probably going to go back to a little bit smaller. So let me come back in here and let's select 85. I'm going to go back to the 85. That it was difficult to light because it was, your object was too big for the scene. So I have been paying close attention to the size of my objects. That should do it. That should be okay. Okie doke. So I have my sphere and I fix it by turning off. Now what I'm going to do from the right view is that similar to making the base of the lamp, when we were making the base of the lamp, I don't need the front half of this. So I'm going to switch. I'm going to make sure that I'm in point view here, or point mode. I'm going to right click and drag around all of these points out here. So I have them all selected, and I'm in wireframe. So I make sure that I have them all selected. Now I can hit Command X to cut everything. So that's all gone. Okay. So when you're looking at it in perspective view, you can see when you're looking in the inside, it looks empty because we have one-sided polys selected. Let me undo that again to make sure. I might, yeah, no, I'm going to go ahead and redo that. That's fine. Edit, redo, Shift Command Z. There we go. So now what I want to do is I want to fill it back up. I want a flat polygon covering the back here, or the front, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to right click and drag around this row of points. And now with all of those points selected, make sure that I have the right ones selected here. And it looks like I have another one selected by mistake. There's one back here that I don't want selected. So I'm going to deselect and do this again. Let me zoom in a little bit so I can see a little bit more clearly. So right click and drag around. Lasso around all of those points. Okay. Something looks weird up here, but I don't know why. Huh. Well, I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to hit P for poly, turn that into a polygon, and that fixes it. Okay, so we have that. That's now covered back up. Okay, so we have half a sphere. Now what we want to do is we want to create a concave volume here. And to do that, we're going to use the Bevel tool to do that. So that's B for bevel. I suppose you can use extrude, but what I want to do, and I'll start by selecting the perspective view here, is I'm going to switch from point mode to polygon mode. And I want to select this polygon right here, just that end cap, like so. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Bevel tool to build it out and build a lip and then build the concave part of it. And let me try to explain the best I can how we're going to do that. So again, if we go to multiply and you select B for bevel, and then from the top view, this would be my recommendation, is to work from the top view. But when I'm doing that, I'm also looking at the other views as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to drag and pull it back just a little bit. And there's something else that's going on. It's really very strange. It's really jumping like crazy and I don't know why. Okay, I'm going to start this over again because there's something that's weird that's happening here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to kill the whole, whoa, no, I don't want to kill the whole thing. Oh, I know what's happening. See, I forgot to put it on another layer. So let me try that again. It's Monday morning and I'm not thinking too clearly here. So I'm going to select the polygon and I'm going to say select connected. And there's something else that's going on here that I don't want, that got goofed up. So I'm just going to go ahead and I got to undo this a few times. There's something that happened here. And I don't know what it is. Let me go ahead and select the sphere. I'm going to switch back to polygon mode. Maybe I don't have to build the sphere again, but if I select polygons, I'll go ahead and I'll select a couple of polygons here and then go back to select connected. There we go. And I'm going to cut the whole thing. There we go, and we'll put it on another layer. So that was part of my problem. Command V, paste it. There we go. So I think we're in better shape now. Because something else was just not right. But I have the background for reference, or the wireframe of Reboot in the background for reference. So now what I'll do is I'll switch back to point mode. And I'm going to do that again. I'm going to right click around the front half. And I'm going to hit Command X to kill all of it. Now I'm going to select all of these points here, right click and drag and lasso around. And I'm going to hit P for poly. There we go. That's much cleaner. Why didn't, why I had selected something else before, I don't know. I had kind of grouped it with the head, I guess. So now I'm going to switch to polygon mode. Make sure that this flat disc in the front is polygon that's selected. And now I'm going to hit B for bevel. And I'm going to right click and drag and pull it, move the mouse forward just a little bit. And then I'm going to move the mouse to the right a little bit. And you'll notice that it's adding just a little bit of geometry to that. I'm starting to create the lip around the edge. And now I'm going to right click again and drag and move it forward just a little bit, like so. So I'm pulling that lip out even a little bit more. And then I'm going to right click and drag again and pull it out like so. And then right click and drag. And now I'm going to move the mouse to the left a little bit to drag it in. So I'm just adding a little bit of geometry at a time. And then I'm going to right click and drag again and move it in. You'll see how, if you look at the perspective view, how I'm adding that lip. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and drag and move it in. I'm going to pull the mouse back a little bit. And you'll notice how I'm building the geometry inside a little bit. And now I right click and drag again and I pull it toward me a little bit and pull it in just a little bit and make it a little bit smaller. And then right click and drag again and make it a little bit smaller yet, like so. And that ought to do it. And notice how I've created that lip and I've added geometry and I've created a concave surface. So that's something that you're going to want to try a few times yourself. It's a little bit awkward to do, but again, it's using the Bevel Tool and it's right click and drag. And then you release the mouse and then you right click and drag again. And you'll have to kind of play with it to get the right proportions. And now that I'm done with that, I can go ahead and I can turn off bevel. And we can deselect for the time being. And there's a few more things that I'm going to do to this. Okay, proportions look okay. But notice how I've created that little lip around what will become his mouth. Okay, so I'm going to create the surface for it. So I hit Q. And we've already created the surface for this. So it's going to be the brass. There we go. And now what I want to do is I'm going to switch to texture wired so I can see back here. Is what I want to do is I need to, and this isn't going to look exactly like his, but it'll be close enough, is that I want to select this back polygon right here. And I'm going to divide it up kind of like a pie or pizza into slices. So to do that, so that I don't have that end gone back here, but I have it all divided up into slices, is that you select the polygon and then we come back to multiply, and I select more. And what I want down here, is it going to be under here? No, it's not going to be. It could be under modify. It could be under detail. I'm not sure. I want it to, yeah, I don't want the pole tool. I want it to make pole. So maybe it's under detail. I forget from time to time. So it's under more. Where is it? Maybe it was under multiply. Maybe I was right the first time. I want more. Yeah, it was under multiply. It's make pole. So with that one polygon selected, when I select make pole, notice here what happens. It takes and it subdivides all of that from the center outward. So what I want to do now is I'm going to zoom in here in the perspective view. And I'm going to select a group of polygons, and I'm going to change them to the black surface. So I'm going to take from the bottom. You can start at the top or the bottom. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to select, make sure that I have polygons selected, not points. And deselect all of them. And now what I want to do is I want to select maybe this top 4 and skip 1. And then select another group, or maybe 2. And then I'm going to select another group of 4 polygons. So hold down the Shift key and click and drag and select those 4. Skip 2, and then click and drag and select these 4. And then skip 2, and then 1, 2, 3. I miscalculated somehow. Let me do it again. So let's do from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. And then skip 2. Hold down the Shift key. 1, 2, 3, 4. Skip 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Skip 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So that should do it. So now what I can do is I can hit Q, and then click here, and then I want to select the black for that. And then there you have it, okay? So I've got most of that done. And that's looking pretty good. Now, if you ever want to tighten any of this up, if it looks too blobby, what you need to do is create what are called loop cuts. And it's a little bit different here than it is if you're using Blender. So if I want to tighten this up and I want to create a loop cut, what I need to do is I need to select maybe 2 or 3 polygons. And then with those selected, I want to go to select loop. So select loop, so the whole thing is selected. And then we're going to use a different kind of tool. And it should be under the construct tab. And what I'm going to do now, it could be under multiply. It is under multiply. I'm going to use Bandsaw Pro. So by Bandsaw Pro, it will take and it will cut on the inside and the outside if I want. By default, if I go in here and I say reset, it makes a cut around the middle. And then if I come back in here and I say, direction is auto, and then enable divide, and I'll notice that there's a cut right in the middle here. Well, I want to tighten up the polygons around the edge closest to each edge. So I'm going to go ahead and set this one for 90%, like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a cut. And I'll select this one for 10%. And that will tighten everything up just a little bit. And if we need to do that elsewhere, we can do that. But then that we should be good. We'll be pretty good. We'll select that, deselect. And let's see how we're doing here. We might tighten up a couple of other areas too that maybe need a little bit cleanup. So for example, let's take around here. Let me go ahead and select a few of these polygons. And I'll go ahead and I'll say select loop. And I'll go back to Bandsaw Pro. And I'll do the same thing, 10 and 10. Just leave it the same. And just to tighten it up so it's not so blobby, it's a little bit more crisp. And I'll go ahead and enable the cut. And then I'll turn off Bandsaw Pro, and I've got those extra cuts in there. And I could probably do the same around the outside, just a little bit. So maybe right around, could be here. Let's see, let's try around here and see what we get. I may not like it, maybe I will, maybe I won't. Select 2 or 3 of those polygons. And then I'm gonna go ahead and say select loop. And then let's select Bandsaw Pro. Yeah, that might work out kind of nice for us. And I'm just adding around each side there. So it just stiffens it up a little bit and it isn't quite so blobby looking. Let's turn off instead of textured wire, just look at it under texture view and see what we have here. And that's not looking half bad. No, I might even take another one. I might take right around here. So let's look at the textured wire again. So as I'm building this, you just sort of kind of get a feel for this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select a few around here. And again, select loop. And then let's go back again and let's select Bandsaw Pro. And let's enable divide. Okay, let's turn that off. And let's see what we have here. Let's go back from textured wire to texture and see what we have. That's not so bad. Pretty clean. Okay, so there we have his mouth created. So I'm going to put him on the, oh, and then I need to put a little ball inside here, right inside here. So we can do that, put it right in here and flatten it. So that's what I'm going to do. From the front view, I'll go ahead and I'll create a new layer, put this one in the back, and then create a ball. And from here, click and drag just a little bit bigger. And we just need to squish it, sort of like a pill-like shape. Like so. And that ought to be pretty good. Let's see how that works. Make sure that it's nice and round. So I'm going to go 25, 25. And then the Z, the depth of it is not important because it overlaps just a little bit. If I zoom in here a little bit, you can see what's going on. Okay. And again, the orientation for this is not that critical, but I have it pinch in the front and the back. So the orientation is along the Z-axis. So I'll go ahead and I'll fix it, and I'll hit Q, and we're going to use brass for that as well. There we go. We're going to cut it, and we're going to put it back on this layer. So we've got that there. And now we're going to take this whole thing, Command X, and cut it and put it on this layer. So there we have that. Okay, and our proportions are pretty close. If I need to make it a little bit bigger, I can, you know, but it's looking pretty close to what we have in our picture here. I could size it up maybe just a little bit, but it doesn't look half bad. So I guess the next thing that I should do is to make sure that all of this is saved. Command S to save. And if I need to change some of the proportions, I can. But I think overall, for demonstration purposes, it doesn't look half bad at the moment. I think the little rounded lip around here is probably a little bit too fat. Notice how I said the other day the legs are a little bit too thin. So, you know, I want you guys to look at those and to pay close attention and to make the necessary adjustments. But now we're ready to send it over to layout and to make some, and to do and refine the finishes. So what I need to do is I need to, let's just do that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to send it over to layout. It's all saved and I have layout open. So now what I can do is I can sync with, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that it's synchronized with layout. Then I can go ahead and I can send it over to layout. And there we have it. Now let's look at it from the camera view. So right now it's in perspective view, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to enlarge this a little bit so that I can get a nice good shot of this. And I need to look at it from camera view. So let's look at it from how the camera sees it. And it's just straightforward. So what I need to do is make this a little bit more interesting. So I'll make sure that at the bottom, the camera is selected and then hit T for move. Now if I move the mouse forward, I get a little bit closer. And then maybe I'll move it over just a little bit. And then I'm going to move the camera up a little bit. So if I right click and I move the mouse forward, it does that. So now I've raised the camera a little bit and I'll hit Y. And then I can rotate the camera and it's a little bit more interesting view. So now what I want to do is we need to refine the surfaces. And I will show you today, and this requires, to do his face requires that it be done in a program like Photoshop. So if you don't know Photoshop, we'll get that started today. And I will leave the Photoshop files inside K-Miller folder inside Google Drive so that you can just copy them and apply them. But I want to get the other surfaces going first and see how that works out for us. Because right now I have all the placeholders, everything is in place, and it's really pretty much ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the surface editor. Okay, and let's go over one of these at a time. So let's start with the black, since that's the first one that's listed here. And maybe I want it a little bit shinier. So I don't want any roughness. Specular highlights maybe a little bit too high. Let's turn it down to maybe 40. And I'm guessing on some of these. I don't know that to be a fact. Sheen, I'll leave that alone. Maybe I could crank that up just a little bit to maybe 5% or 10%. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to select the brass texture, but we already have something for brass and gold in the presets that we can use that should look pretty nice. So what I need to do in the top here is click on presets and bring that up. And now what I can do with the left one here, I'm going to click in here and under metals, let's see what we have. And here's gold. That wouldn't be a bad one to try. And let's scroll down and here's brass. So I'm kind of partial to brass, but it's worth trying both. And again, the way this works, if you haven't, already gotten that, it's not going to be named, well, I happen to name both the same. But when I have the right surface selected here, the one that I want to affect, When I double click on the preset, it's going to load the settings into this, but it will not change the name of it. Okay. Now, this is affected dramatically by the lighting. And if I don't like that, then maybe I should go back up and let's try the gold. So it's important to note that when I double click on this and I apply those settings, it's not going to change the name to gold. It's going to leave it the name brass, the one that I have used here. So that's kind of important. Now, if you don't like the color that they have selected for this, you can always click on that. And maybe we can try one that's a little bit, let's try one that's a little bit more orangey and see how that works. So you can always modify these to your liking. And if that's too yellow, then we can try again, something again. Maybe let's try that one until you get something that works for you. Now, another one that they have here that we want is the chrome. So the next one down happens to be named chrome because I knew that that would be the case, that we would want that. So let's come back in here and let's scroll down. And here we have a nice chrome texture. So I'll double click on that. And so some of the basic ones were already set. Then probably one of the last ones, we're going to leave the face alone for the time being. And then I'm going to go to red. And I want this to be, I'm going to go ahead and turn on smoothing for that so it looks a little bit nicer. And I'm also going to you know what, I'm going to switch this from principled BSDF and I'm going to go to standard. And that changes it to gray. So what I need to do is I need to come back and select a nice deep red surface. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the specular highlights. So maybe we'll make that 10%. Glossiness, 40%. Reflection, maybe 10%. And that will reflect its environment. And then we're pretty much good to go for the red. So that happened pretty quickly. So I want to make sure that I'm saving everything here. So the first thing that I should do is I should save my scene. So save scene as. Make sure that it goes inside the correct folder here. So I'm going to go back into my desktop. I need to go back into Content Fall 2020 because that's what I created for that. And I go back into Scenes. We'll name it Reboot Fall 2020. Okay, so I've saved the scene. So all of these light settings, camera settings, and everything, which are for the most part default at the moment, will be saved. But I also need to save the objects because I've changed the surfaces to that. So I'm going to go back to save again. And I want to say save all objects. And it gives me a warning. Are you sure you want to save all objects? Yes, because we have changed the surfaces on all of those. Okie doke. So what I want to do next is I'm going to switch to Photoshop because I need to create the eyes and the eyebrows for this. Okay. So I can go ahead and I can close the surface editor for the time being. I can close presets for the time being. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open. Move that up. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up Photoshop on my computer. And as I said, if you don't have Photoshop, it's not, not to worry because I will make these files available to you. So anytime, this is kind of moving us into one of the next things that I want to cover after Reboot is done here. And what I want to do is I want to create a new surface here. Let's go ahead and move this in Photoshop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select File, New. And we're going to measure this in pixels, not in inches. And the resolution only needs to be 72 pixels per inch. And the height and the width, I'm going to measure in pixels. And I'm going to measure this maybe 1,000 by 1,000. And it has to be, when you're creating surfaces, they have to be squares. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say create. So there, I have my square. So one of the things that I like to do, and I'm in Photoshop here, is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to switch preferences and my units and rulers from inches to pixels, since that's what I use the measurement as. And now to be able to center things up, I'm going to bring out some guidelines here at 500 and 500 pixels, just so I know where the center is. And now what I need to do is I'm going to use, you don't always have to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use down here, I'm going to use the Ellipse tool to make an ellipse. And I'm going to move my face here, up here, and watch what happens. I want to make sure that I have shape layers selected. And I'm going to click and drag and make a nice big ellipse for his eyes. Now what it did is it made it a white fill, and I don't want a white fill, I want it black, so I can double click here. And let's go ahead and switch to black. There we go. So, you know, these are the approximate proportions, and that looks okay. Now what I can do is I can duplicate that. So let me move that and kind of center this up. And this, you know, may require some tweaking, maybe not. So to duplicate this, I'll just select the layer and hit Command J to duplicate it. And I'm going to go ahead and move this over like so. Hold down the Shift key. Now I have both of his eyes. Now I want to create little highlights for them. So I'm going to also do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the Ellipse tool and make sure that it's a shape layer, but I'm going to make sure that it is, the fill instead is black. I am going to make sure that it is white. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. Let's go back again and undo. There we go. I got to make sure that this is deselected, otherwise it will affect it. There we go. Okay, so let me try again. Let's go ahead and click and drag. I'll hold down the Shift key, and there we have it. So now I can use my Move tool here and move this into position, like so. Then I'll make a copy of it, and I can hold down the Option key if I want. That's another way to make a copy. Hold down the Shift key to constrain the proportions and move it over. Now I have his pupils. Now I need to create the eyebrows. And the eyebrows are a little bit different. Okay, so to create the eyebrows, I am going to use the Shape tool. But to do that, I'm going to come up here, and I want to use the Pen tool. So I'm going to click like so and pull that out a little bit. I'm going to click like so. And I'm going to come down here and click like so. And then click like so. And click like so. Click like so. And we'll come back, click like so. Click like so, and click like so, and click like so, and click like so, and then come back to the beginning and click. Now I need to come back and edit some of these points. Now I created a path, I goofed, so I got to do this again. So I'm going to delete it, everything. I wasn't paying attention because in Photoshop, for those of you who use it, I want to make sure that this is a shape layer. So I want to make sure that black is the color that I'm making here. Oh, come on. Let's go back here. I want those ellipses. There we go. Make sure they're deselected. You know, it's easy to get goofed up. Make sure that I have shape layer. So let's do that again. Click and pull just a little bit. Click and pull just a little bit. And click and pull just a little bit. 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 Click and pull just a little bit, and then click and pull. So this is going to require a little bit of tweaking with points. And that's okay. I don't mind. There we go. Okay, so now I can come back and it looks kind of funky. So now what I need to do is I need to select the direct selection tool, and I need to come back and I need to select each of these individual anchor points and start to manipulate them a little bit and to fine tune this just a little bit and to smooth this out just a little till I get something I'm happy with. And I like moving the anchor points around a little bit. And if I want to get rid of an anchor point, I can do that. I can come back here and under the pen tool, I can select delete anchor point. Maybe I want to get rid of this one, so I'll get rid of that. There we go. Then I can come back to my direct selection tool and I can tweak this a little bit to get the eyebrows looking the way I want them. Pull that in a little bit. There we go. So we're getting something close. Let's move that a little bit. Let's move this a little bit. Let's come back here. Let's move this a little bit. Move this in here a little bit. So I'm just moving these around a little bit so that we get a look that I'm going for. Well, I'll get something close because how am I doing on time? I have a little bit of time left here today. Pull this out a little bit. I like the pen tool better in Illustrator. I think it does a much better job. But, you know, we're working with what we have here. Let's move this here. Kind of center this up. Center this up. So move this down a little bit. I'm just playing with the points until I get a shape that I'm happy with. Close enough for government work. Okay, so I'm going to switch to the path selection tool. Move this down and over a little bit so I get what I'm looking for. So I'm going to select all of these. I'm going to make sure that everything is selected and select and center it all. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key, select these other layers, and then move everything. Oh, come on. Let's select all. Deselect. So let's select. There we go. Let's move this one down a little bit. So make sure that that selected. Move it down just a little bit. Let's take his eyes and let's move it down a little bit. So let's move the other one down a little bit. Come on. I think I got it. There we go. Okay, let's take his pupils, or the highlights, I should say. Let's take these and hold down the Shift key and select this one. Pull them down a little bit, like so. And there we have it. So now I need to save this. So I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file. So I think I want to tweak the eyebrows a little bit later, but we'll do that. I'll do that after class. So I'm going to go ahead and save, and I'm going to first save it as a Photoshop file. Save as, and you'll see what I'm doing here, because I like saving all the layers and that sort of thing. So I'm going to save it on my computer. And where do I want to save it? I'm going to save it on my desktop, and I'm going to save it inside Content 2020, inside Images. Okay, and I'll name this Mike's Eyes. So I've saved that as a Photoshop file. Now I need to save this as a JPEG. Now newer versions of Lightwave accept other file formats, but I'm going to save this as a JPEG. And Blender probably only allows you to use JPEGs as well. So I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm going to go to File. I'm going to say Save As, and Save on Computer. Same location, but instead of a Photoshop file, I'm going to save this as a JPEG. Boom. Now, when you save this as a JPEG, we have issues because it brings in the white background as well. And we will want to get rid of the background when we're in Lightwave. So what I need to do is I need to turn off the pupils. And I need to save this now as a JPEG, because I'm going to use this as what is called a layer mask. So now I'm going to call this one his eyes, or his mask. And what I could do, actually what I should probably do first is I'm going to go to Image, and I'm going to duplicate the whole thing. And what I'm going to also do is I'm going to go to Image Mode, and I'm going to switch to grayscale. Because when you're creating layer masks, what you need to do is work in grayscale. That's the only thing that will work for a layer mask. Because what this will serve to do is to mask out the eyes and the eyebrows and cut away the background for us in Lightwave. So now what I need to do is I need to, with that one done, I can go ahead and I can save this as a JPEG. File, Save As, save it on my computer. And again, I don't want it as a Photoshop file. I want it a JPEG. Where's the JPEG? And I don't want it to be called, I'll call it Mike Eyes Mask. So I know that this one is for the mask. So I'll save that in the same location. Okay, so now I'm set to go. I'm ready to go back to, now that I have his eyes, and I've created a mask for his eyes, I'm set to go back to Lightwave. and to refine the surfaces. So now what I want to do is I want to come back to the surface editor here and bring that up. Let's bring that up. Let's move my face down here. And so that I have a good shot of his face here, I want to make sure that the face is selected. And I'm going to switch. We could use the node editor, but I'm going to switch from principled BSDF to standard. And I'm going to go back here and I'm going to select that blue that I used for the background here. But now what I want to do is I want to add under T, I want to add an image texture. And that's where I'm going to bring in the eyes for this. So I hit T for texture. And then what I want to do is I need to determine the kind of projection that I'm going to use. And it's a planar projection. By default, it will project along the z-axis. If I want it projected along the y-axis, it would project it this way. And if I want it projected along the x-axis, it would do it this way. So I'll leave it the default. And even if you get it wrong, you can always click through it and find a different one. It's going to be a planar projection, even though it's slightly concave. And now I need to load the image. Well, here it is. Here's Mike's eyes. So I'll go ahead and project it, and there they are. Now, all I see is the white. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the projection, but I'm going to go ahead and I don't want it to be repeated. So I'll reset, and then I'm going to go ahead and say automatic sizing and see what I get. And that's pretty darn close. I could make them a little bit smaller, and if I want to, then under scale, I can go ahead and I can scale the X a little bit, or I can scale the Y a little bit, right? Now, it's not, if I see a little bit of the background, that's okay. But now I have a nice projection in here. And that's how that works. But now how do I get rid of that white? What I want to do next, and this will be the last thing that we will probably get to do today, is that I want to copy this layer because now I've changed some settings in here. I've changed the scale. I could always change the position of it. That if I decide, you know what, I want it to go up or down, I can change the Y like so. If I want to change the X, I can do that like so. You know, but when I have it positioned and scaled where I want it, now watch what happens when I hit Y. Okay. Again, it does weird things. So you'll know that if you get the wrong one selected, and I need to go back again now. Come on, there we go. It's kind of slow and catching up. That you need to check the right projection on this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this layer because I need to use the mask to cut away the white. So I'll select the mask, or I'm sorry, the layer, and I want to copy current layer. And then I'm going to paste. And I don't want it to replace the current layer. I want to add to the layer. So I've just duplicated it. It's all I've done. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to replace this image with the one that I just created for the mask. So here's his mask, and I'll do that. And all it does is it replaces it. It's layered on top. So if you've used, Photoshop, it's just one layer on top of another. So now what I want to do, instead of the blending mode being normal, I want it to be alpha. And that's where I create the mask or the hole. But notice what happens. It's cutting away the eyes and the eyebrows, not the background. So what I need to do now is with this layer is simply invert it. And it's going to take a minute for it to catch up. Come on. There we go. So now it's cut away that white background. And I can turn smoothing on for this. So we can close this. We can turn smoothing on, get that nice and smooth. And now I have his eyes in there. So we've done a lot today. I've created his mouth. We've refined his surfaces a little bit. And we're going to really dress these up a little bit because we don't have an environment for him. But what I'm going to do Wednesday is we're going to create a composite. We're going to put him in the background. of a photograph and make it look believable so that you can see the shadows and you see the environment reflected inside him. So that's pretty much where we're at for today. And he's looking pretty decent. He looks all right. So I'm going to make sure that he's saved. So again, I want to make sure that everything is saved. So I'm going to save the scene. So save scene. So make sure that that's updated. And then I'm also going to go save, and I'm going to say save all objects. Make sure that that's saved. I could have probably just said save all, and that would work well for us too. So there's a question here before we're done today. Couldn't you create a transparent background in Photoshop so you wouldn't need? That's if it allows, so the question is from Angel Rojas. Couldn't I create a transparent background in Photoshop? In the past, it wouldn't be workable because to do that, you would have to use a GIF file or a PNG. And in the past, Lightwave would not accept PNG or GIF files. So you could only use a JPEG. Actually, before it accepted JPEGs, it only used Targa files, which were resident files to Lightwave. Those were TGA files. So you had to create a mask. It's worth trying. In recent versions, I have not tried PNG files, but you could give it a whirl and see if Lightwave accepts PNG files or even GIFs. And then you're right, you wouldn't have to do that because it would automatically cut it away. But it is kind of important to understand clipping masks because you'll be using those a lot in the future to create more complex image maps on the surfaces of your objects. You know, what you want to actually duplicate a lot. But you're right, if Lightwave now accepts PNG files, then it would be totally unnecessary. But I don't know. I don't know for certain. I hope that answers your question and everybody else's. Okay, so now if I switch from camera view to perspective view, we can look at that. We can also look at this under VPR to see what that's going to look like. And let's switch back to camera view. You can see that it's, you know, I mean, it's in this kind of weird environment. And, you know, maybe the gold, you know, I want it a little bit darker, a little bit more orangey. So I can change that. But I want to put it in a believable environment. I just don't want him floating in midair. And that's what I'm going to do on Wednesday. And then we'll be able to wrap it up and we'll be able to see. And we'll make sure that we add a plane on the bottom of him so that we can have his shadows cast in that environment as well. Any other questions before we go today? No? While I have all of you here, let me pause the recording and I'm going to go ahead and hold on here. Yeah, I'll pause the recording and I'm going to continue to take roll because some of you dropped in after I took roll earlier. And then that will be it for today. If you need to review this, I'll have the video of this posted pretty quickly thereafter. So hold on. So let me pause the recording. Okay, so I got the recording turned back on. So are there any questions for today? It's to get used to the Bevel Tool to create that hemisphere or a half sphere, and to create the concave part of that. Takes a little bit of practice. To get the proportions that you want, you can. I can always go back in and I can, change these a little bit and expand, select a ring of polygons and then change the size of them and expand it and stuff and play with proportions a little bit. As I said the other day, though, in the legs, it would probably be just, if I wanted to change the proportions of his upper legs here, it would be easier if I just remade the whole leg. It's too hard once you've bent and distorted it to get it to work, work the way I want it. Okay. So if there aren't any questions, no, everybody's good. Let me know if the ping file works for you, if you want to try that as a projection. But if it doesn't project and it doesn't appear, then it's still the case that Lightwave doesn't accept ping files. It will only accept JPEGs. It may accept Photoshop files. They may have changed that. But there was a time when I had problems with JPEGs. I could only use TGA files. So. Okie doke. Okay, then I will, it's okay for everybody to leave. And I will see you Wednesday. So give this a whirl. Try to catch up if you haven't and get close to finishing him. And then the next assignment is going to be work on a simple toy or something like that. And for those of you working in Blender, I can point to some tutorials that you can do and actually duplicate what they have done. Because as I said, I just don't know Blender well enough, I think, yet. I'm not that I don't feel confident enough with it yet for all of you. Okay. So that's it. See everybody Wednesday. Okay. Bye-bye.